Okay, welcome to everybody who's just joining us on the webinar now about NHR Portugal's non-habitual residency tax regime. We have got the lovely Paula Santos from Tax Team Consulting, who's going to be giving a presentation on how NHR works and what that means for taxes when you move to Portugal. And once that's over, we'll also have a little bit of time for Q&A. So I can see that people are joining us now. If you are joining us from somewhere around the world, I'm curious to know where. So perhaps you want to put that in the chat box and just let us know. And I'm also curious if you have already moved to Portugal or you're thinking about it doing it soon. Where are you thinking of moving to? You'll notice there's a Q&A box there. So if you have questions and answers, you can put them in there or you can put them in the chat box either. I'll keep an eye on them and try and make sure that we get as many of them answered as possible. If we don't have time for them, which is quite likely because anything to do with tax can be very, very specific, I'll be giving Paula's email address and you'll be able to speak to her. And you'll be able to book a session with her as well and just get a little bit more one-to-one advice if you need it. So, Paula, perhaps you want to just start and tell us all a little bit about yourself and Tax Team Consulting and what it is that you do.
Okay, as you said, James, my name is Paula Santos, fiscal consultancy area for more than 15 years. Which is something I do like very much. Tax Team Consulting started 2 years ago. And let me see if I can. Yeah, and here's a little about us. We are based in the Algarve, sunny Algarve, south of Portugal, more precisely in Nervação da Pera. And we are focused on assisting our clients with their personal taxes and fiscal matters in Portugal. Our aim is to support freelancers, self-employed, and expats that want to move to Portugal, to sunny Portugal. And we help with the fiscal obligations so that they can relax and they focus on what really matters. In terms of services, our services are individual services, basically. Fiscal representation for individuals, and this is to obtain fiscal number. And for example, if someone buy a property and do not want to live yet in Portugal, and we deal with the tax matters like property taxes and so on. Annual tax return, anyone that is resident in Portugal must submit an annual tax return. We help with this. Or for example, a non-resident that rents a property, and this is something that we do on an annual basis. Freelance services for those that want to start a new opportunity or want to continue to be self-employed, freelancer, digital nomads, we help on that. Tax advisement, of course, local lodging, alojamento local. Local lodging is someone that can be resident or non-resident and has a property in Portugal and rents the property to tourists. We help as that as well, and with all the necessary services involved, which are a lot. Personal accountancy services, bookkeeping, and NHR registration, which is the main issue or main subject that we will be speaking today. And let's speak about how to qualify in terms of applying for it and taxation. We'll speak about this now in our webinar. Okay, speaking a little how this NHR started, non-habitual resident. This was created in 2009 to attract investors and professionals with high value activities, such as scientific, doctors, artists, engineers, etc. But at the time did start to attract as well pensionists a lot. And this allows individuals to qualify for a special tax status that is valid for 10 years. Okay. Qualifying, how to qualify, and a lot of people normally ask how they can qualify. Well, it's very simple to qualify for registration of NHR. Individuals that become resident, they need to become fiscal resident, okay, and not being resident on the previous 5 years, okay. That is the rules basically to apply for the NHR status. NHR registration must be submitted after becoming resident, fiscal resident. And for example, for someone that registered this year, 2022, as fiscal resident in Portugal, they have the full year to apply for the NHR status, and the deadline is next year, 31st of March. Okay, you don't have to register straight away, but normally it's better to register, apply, and then you are free from forgetting to register or to apply.
So can I just ask, Paula, is that from any time now until the 31st of December 2022, someone who registers has until 31st of March 2023 to register, is that correct? And
right.
Then once we go into the 2023, then it starts a whole new year.
Yes, the fiscal year in Portugal is from the 1st of January till the 31st of December.
Okay.
Which means that for someone that became fiscal resident in 2022, it will be fiscal resident for basically for the full year. Not like this, but it's considered resident in 2022.
Okay.
That is why the NHR will apply for 2022. Okay. To apply for the NHR, first obtain a fiscal number, of course, then register as tax resident, Portuguese tax resident with the tax authorities. And then after being fiscal resident with the tax authorities, then can apply for the NHR. Very important. Once obtained the NHR status, it is obligatory to submit an annual tax return in the following year, okay, between April and June. Now we are in a period of submitting the annual tax return 2021, for example, and declare the worldwide income and expenses. Okay.
Can I just ask about fiscal registration there, or becoming fiscally resident? Because some people will have moved to Portugal and perhaps even, registered locally. Are they considered fiscally resident at that point, or is that a separate thing?
Separate. One thing is obtaining the residency. Mm-hmm. The other thing can be the residency, the certificate. If it is an EU citizen, it's certificate in the local council. If it is a non-EU, it's the residency with the CEF. Okay. After having the residency, then can register as fiscal resident with the tax authorities.
Okay, so they're two separate things.
Two separate things, yes. Sometimes people do obtain the residency and think that, okay, I'm already a resident, fiscal resident, and no, it's not. Okay, have to update the tax authorities. Okay. In terms of NHR and personal annual income, the IRS, in terms of taxation, under the NHR status, pensions are taxed at 10% flat rate. Okay. Interest and dividends and long-term rentals from outside, the long-term rentals here are from outside of Portugal, okay, are tax exempt. And this is if could be taxed abroad under the double taxation treaty rules. This is very important. the double taxation treaties, we have to check it. Okay. Employment income and self-employed income. The flat rate is 20% for high value activities, if no taxes paid at source or in the country where the person receives the income. And exempt if paid at source. Examples of high value added activities. And this is the reason why the NHR started. For general directors, executive directors, commercial directors, doctors, teachers, university teachers, IT, engineering, journalists, artists, all of this list that is here are considered high value activities. And if someone is have this activity, then can apply for the NHR and be taxed under the NHR rules, okay, and be taxed at 20%. Let's go to a few examples. Have here Sophie, sales director from the US. She's 33 years old. Sophie is a sales director. Let's imagine that she's working for a US company and she's planning to move to Portugal for the first time. Which steps does Sophie need to follow to obtain the NHR? And this, we already mentioned this when we were speaking. First of all, assign for a fiscal representative and obtain the Portuguese fiscal number called NIF as non-resident. After that, sign a rental contract or purchase a property in Portugal, and request the resident permit with the SEF. And here, because she's a non-EU citizen, has to be with the Immigration and Borders Authorities called SEF. Update then, after having the residency, update the tax residency with the tax authorities. And after this, yes, Sophie can apply for the NHR status.
So it sounds like the application for NHR status is more or less at the end of all the other things that you need to do when moving to Portugal.
Correct. Let's see here another example. Henry, freelance journalist, and he's from the UK. Henry bought a property in June 2021, and he works from home and writes about investment and economics. Henry also have dividends, received dividends. In terms of taxation in Portugal, from the income that he received from June till December 2021. Self-employed income under the NHR rules, 20%. He will be taxed on 20%. Dividends, he will be tax exempt on that income. Since these are subject to be taxed in the UK and the state of source under the double taxation treaty between Portugal and the UK.
Can I just ask about social security there? Because presumably Henry, as someone who's working, is obliged to pay social security in Portugal, I imagine. How would that work out for him? Can you give an idea of what does it come after he's taxed for NHR, and what sort of percentages of his income would he expect to pay? Anyone registered as self-employed in Portugal is obliged to be registered with Social Security. Okay. First year, the self-employed will be exempt from Social Security contributions. On the second year, it will start the monthly contributions based on the income from the previous quarter. And the percentage is around 11-12%, depending on the income received. Okay. But anyone is obliged to be registered with Social Security. Okay.
Let's see here another example. Lisa, she's a computer engineer from Belgium, 37 years old. Lisa made arrangements with her employee from Belgium, and she's an IT and working for an IT company from Belgium. She now started to work from Portugal remotely, as a lot of people have done, especially now with the pandemic. And Lisa signed a 4-year rental contract for an apartment in Lagos. And also she have rented her own apartment in Belgium, Brussels. In terms of taxation, how it will work. The employed income, tax exempt in Portugal, since Lisa's income is taxed in Belgium. And this is under the NHR. In terms of the rentals, she will also be tax exempt in Portugal, since these are taxed in Belgium. And now our last example, Robert. He's a retired teacher from Canada, 70 years old. Robert receives a pension from Canada and is considering the possibility of becoming resident in Portugal to apply for the NHR status. In terms of taxation, under the NHR, for someone that receives a pension, the tax rate is 10%. Might be exempt if taxed at source in Canada. Why there is here a little box of NHR, one NHR and another resident? Because after the 10 years of being registered for NHR, then the Robert, let's take this example, Robert will start to pay taxes on his pension at the normal marginal tax rates from 14.5% to 48%. Currently, those are the rates that we have.
And does that start from zero? Or is there a tax-free allowance or anything like that? Does it start from the first euro of your pension?
No, it will start from 4,104. Currently,
okay. So if your pension was 4,103, you wouldn't pay any tax on that?
Correct.
Okay. And just one other question, because I saw it come up on the chat, is that some people have other types of income that they get around pension age. The two that I saw example was the Social Security in the US and a 401k. Are all types of income that you get roughly at pension age treated at the same and taxed at 10%, or does it vary from income to income?
No, in terms of pension, if it is considered the same pension like in Portugal, Social Security pension, then it will be subject to the same.
Okay.
Okay, and here we got to the end in terms of presentation and summary, basically, of the NHR. And I think this is it. Do you want to go ahead to the
questions?
The questions?
Yep. Well, I will ask them to you. I've just got one, which is just about what we were discussing, the tax, the sort of if a pension is taxed in the USA, so it's already been taxed at source, is it still taxed in Portugal at 10%?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there's a double taxation treaty between Portugal and the US, and if the pension is taxed in the US, no, Portugal cannot tax. That's why we have the double taxation treaties between countries. Portugal do not have with all countries. For example,
okay.
Australia, we do not have, I'm thinking about Australia now, we do not have a double taxation treaty, which means that if Even if the individual will pay taxes in Australia, will have to pay here as well.
And let's say, for example, that there was a country and they tax pensions at 1%, and Portugal would do it at 10% under NHR. Would you get away with just paying 1% tax because that's what it's taxed in your country, or would you have to make up the difference?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Sorry, I kind of made it up there. I don't know if it's a real question or not.
Oh, go ahead.
But let's say you have a country that taxes pensions at 1% or 5% or something like that. So it is taxing pensions. If you move to Portugal under NHR, would you be okay with just paying that 5% or that 1% in your home country, or would Portugal want to make up the difference between 10% and whatever it's taxed at in that country?
Portugal can make the difference.
Portugal can make the difference. Okay, so you can't pay any less than 10% in theory, it sounds like.
In terms, for example, of someone receiving a salary, or let's imagine that someone receives a salary from abroad,
yeah,
from the US, and pay taxes 5%. Then it will be exempt here in Portugal. Okay.
Okay, let's do some more questions now. And I should mention that the questions, some of them are going to be a little bit specific, and I don't know, and especially just the ones that I'm making up, I think are a little bit specific. If you want to speak to Paula on a one-on-one basis, I think I'm correct in saying that you charge €79.99 per hour plus EVA, which is VAT. So if you want 1 hour of her time just to get an idea of what your tax situation would be if you moved to Portugal and applied for NHR, that's how much it would cost you. I think it's good to do these things in advance before making any big decisions. So I definitely recommend doing it. But we will try and answer some of the other questions. Let's see. I know Julie asked about, will I be taxed on UK rental properties? I think you covered that already, to say that properties where they are taxed in that country would be exempt. So that'll just be with UK tax office. And another question she asked, which is that she would be eligible to take a 25% tax-free lump sum from her pension when she reaches 55 in the UK. So it's something specific to there. If she moves to Portugal before that point, would she be allowed to do that in Portugal, or is she going to be taxed on it? Does that make sense?
To get 25% of the pension?
Yeah, so in the UK, she could take 20, let's say she had a pension of 100,000, she could take 25,000 out and she wouldn't pay any tax on it. That's just a specific rule in the UK. Mm-hmm. If she moved to Portugal at 54 or something and then turned 55, would she still be allowed to do that here, or should she wait, do that in the UK and then move to Portugal?
I think the second one probably would be better, because if not, would pay 10% on that income.
Let's see. Okay. Let's see. With regards to dividends from a foreign company, so do they have to be paid directly to a Portuguese bank account, or can they be paid locally and then you use a money transfer service to move it to source to Portugal? So I guess the question is there, does it have, when you're doing something for it to qualify for NHR, does it have to go directly into a Portuguese bank account, or does it matter if it goes into a foreign bank account first?
No, it can go to a foreign, should come to Portuguese. But let's imagine that for some reason you don't have a bank account in Portugal. Of course, you can receive in a foreign bank account. The important is to be compliant with the Portuguese tax authorities and declaring the information, declaring the income.
Okay.
And have documentation to prove that, because in case of an audit. Okay.
Always good
Or
to have
being requested.
documentation. Yeah.
Okay.
So Alan is asking about capital gains tax. If taxes on capital gains are withheld in Canada, when investments are sold, is that exempt from the 28% Portuguese tax? So a slightly confusing question, but I'll try and rephrase it and hopefully I get it right. Does NHR affect capital gains tax?
Capital from selling a property, or
I guess there's two options here. One could be, it doesn't say one, well, it says when investments are sold. So I'm,
Okay.
I'm assuming that's stocks, but I guess we could look at both, which is one is if you own stocks and the other is if you own a property.
Let's start from the property.
Okay.
Let's imagine that you have a property in Canada, you sell the property, that property is subject to be taxed only in Canada.
Okay.
In terms of stocks, investments, Portugal will tax on a gain and will tax 28% on the gain.
Okay.
The NHR rules here will not apply.
Okay, so NHR doesn't benefit you for stocks here. Okay. So a next question from Karina. If I have the NHR status and I work for 2 years in Portugal and then I retire, will I be NHR for 2 + 8 years or 2 + 10 years? So do you understand that, Paula, or do you want me to try and rephrase it?
No, yes, it's 10 consecutive, if I can say it like this word, 10 years. Okay.
So it doesn't matter whether you're a pensioner or whether you're still working. As soon as you come in and you register, your 10 years starts there, and you might change what type of income you have over those years. Is that right?
Correct. Even, for example, if someone, and this happens a lot, someone comes to Portugal, apply for the NHR in the first year of fiscal residency, because have to, but do not benefit from the NHR status in the first or second year, then the NHR will always count from the first fiscal year. Okay.
And am I right in saying that if you get one option or one chance to apply for NHR?
Yes.
So you should do it when you arrive, just in case your income changes and you end up doing something that does benefit from it in the future.
Correct. We normally advise to request because it's there, and in 10 years a lot of things happen in our lives, which means that in the future, even not benefiting from the NHR in first or second or third year, you might benefit in the future.
Okay. Otherwise, you'd have to leave for 5 years and come back.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. That's a lot of work.
Yes. And it's not just leaving, it's updating as well the tax authorities. For example, leaving the country today and inform the tax authorities that you become non-resident today. So that the 5 years will come from that day. Okay,
so you have to let them know that you're leaving.
Yes, you have to let them know.
Joshua asks, if I moved to Portugal in September and was accepted for NHR, do the NHR tax benefits count immediately, or would it be from the following March?
No, the NHR status is requested for the fiscal year that you become fiscal resident.
Okay.
Is that if you arrive in September and if you become fiscal resident in September, the NHR will start from September, and it will be the first fiscal year in terms of NHR will be from September to December 31st.
Okay.
Okay. You will lose a few months of benefits from the NHR if that will be the case, but that's how the rules are, and we have to follow.
James asks, he doesn't pay tax on his state pension in the UK because is less than the allowance. So would he pay 10% tax under the NHR scheme in Portugal?
At the beginning, yes, the 10%. It can be the 10%, depending on the amount of income. What we normally do is we see if, let's imagine that is a small pension. Mm-hmm. And because there's an allowance of 4,100 in Portugal, we see, for example, if it is better to use the NHR or not, because the NHR is a flat rate of 10%. Okay. Then it might be beneficial or not.
So it might be beneficial or not on pensions. And then with the self-employed and the employed, they also have the option of paying normal Portuguese taxes. Is it the case that it might not necessarily be beneficial to go with the NHR?
Correct. Depending on the type of income, okay, and the amount of income, yes, might be beneficial or not, depends.
So you really need to speak to someone and get a sort of a tax simulation before deciding which route.
Yes, and also there's a lot of implications that, for example, if someone is a normal self-employed, because the income is not very high, then normally in that situation is more beneficial. And also because we do have a lot of tax credits in Portugal, family tax credits, health, gym, vet, etc.
Okay.
Then it's case by case.
There are quite a few specific questions here, so I will sort of be encouraging people to speak to Paula directly. But here's an easy one. Is there a minimum duration you need to stay in Portugal every year to get the NHR?
If there is a minimum, well, according to the legislation, it's 183 days.
Okay.
That you need to be fiscal resident. However, for example, let's imagine that you become fiscal resident, NHR, but then you will be traveling a lot. Mm-hmm. Happens very much. Portugal will not be looking at you and say, oh, you were not here the 183 days. But yes, it is in the legislation because it has to be in the legislation, okay? But it's not something that you have to be here the 180 days.
Okay, so you don't have to be there for the full 183 to keep getting it every year.
No. If you become fiscal resident in Portugal, is because you want to be fiscal resident in Portugal, be subject to the Portuguese tax rules.
But possibly if you're spending all that extra time in another country, they might be looking for a slice of the income as well. So you might have to be careful there.
Yes, should.
If you participate in the Golden Visa program, do you apply for NHR in parallel? Or is this something you would do after you have everything sorted?
After.
Okay.
Sorted. Okay. I was reading here one very quickly.
Yep.
We were told that to qualify for the NHR, we cannot own a home outside of Portugal, and it sounds as if it is not correct. Does the non-Portugal residents need to be designated as secondary? And Patricia, you can have property in the UK, you can have property in Portugal. If you decide to be resident in Portugal, that's where you will be subject to be taxed and has to declare the worldwide income. You can have a property in Portugal, you can have in Spain, in the UK. The important is to where you will be fiscal resident and be subject to be taxed.
So Philip is asking, the artist category, does that include photographers? which I guess is a good question, is how do you, when you see the list of special professions, how do you work out what's included in them? Is there a definition under each? Like, for example, does a photographer count as an artist?
It depends, but
Okay.
can be, if that is exactly the activity that we'll be providing.
Okay. So I think Carl is asking, but I think it's sort of been answered in the chat, whether NHR or Visa D is better. But I guess the NHR isn't necessarily a residency visa, is it?
No.
Maybe you could just sort of clarify that.
No, the D7 is the residency requested to the SEF.
Okay.
The customs or border control police have several names. The D7 is getting the residency. The NHR is a status as resident.
Okay, so they are two different things, but I guess it's a confusing, or at least I find it confusing anyway, the non-habitual residency name. When I first read it, I thought this was a special thing for people who didn't live in Portugal. But actually it's for people who do live in Portugal.
Correct.
But I find it confusing, so maybe other people find it confusing as well.
It sounds, and it is a little confusing in the beginning, yes. I put here the slide of the example of Sophia.
Yeah.
It has here the 5 steps to apply for the NHR. Okay,
and so NHR is the very last one.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let's see if we've got any more questions. Do you, okay, so, and when you apply for the NHR status, Rafi is asking if you need a formal lease on an apartment, but is your address taken into account when you apply for NHR, or is that beforehand?
If, for example, if you rent a property and apply for the residency with that address, that will be seen as the main address. Mm-hmm. And then when update the tax authorities to resident, that will be the fiscal residency address. Okay. And okay. The NHR will be under that address as well. Then, for example, if someone changes the, let's imagine that you rent a property today, but then you will not stay and you will move to, or will buy a property after renting one. Then the tax authorities need to be updated as well with that address. Okay, so each time you move, whether it's renting or property purchase, you need to update the tax authorities. Correct. Some people have asked about sort of tax-free savings or tax-free investment accounts that they might have in their own country. I know in the UK it's called an ISA, which is where you can grow your stocks and shares or anything, and you don't get taxed. What happens to that when you move to Portugal? Can you still grow it and not be taxed? Portugal will tax only when the sale will take place. Okay. If you keep growing the investment, you will not be taxed, of course. Only on the gain. Only on the gain. So that's only when you sell. So right. if you were thinking you might not stay in Portugal forever, you could potentially hold it in there, not pay tax in Portugal, and then go back home and take it out and not pay tax again. Right. Okay. Let's see what else we've got. Seeing here, George asking, self-employed means self-employed with source of income in Portugal or income from anywhere? Self-employed from anywhere. You can register as self-employed in Portugal and be providing services to a US company or to a UK company and working from Portugal as self-employed. And if you were providing services to a company in Portugal, would you still qualify for NHR as well? Yes. Okay. Yes.
And just on the list of professions that are, in the special list, do you know when I understand the list gets updated every few years. Do you know when it's next due to be updated?
No, we don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
And it's not on the budget
Okay.
for 2022 that is going to be approved.
So for the time being, if you register for one of these, you will be accepted. And I assume if it does change, if, for example, this year dentists are included and in 2 years' time they're not, you would still get your 10 years of exemption. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It will continue. Here's a high value in this.
Let's see if we can get some more questions. So if Wilf asks, if someone is paying tax on rental income abroad, so they have a property abroad and they're paying taxes there, what are the tax liabilities in Portugal under NHR? I think we sort of touched on this before.
Yeah, correct.
Which is that Portugal isn't going to tax that one. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's see if we can have one or two more. Is the NHR only applicable to non-Portuguese citizens?
No, it's also to Portuguese. The rule here is not being fiscal resident in the last 5 years.
Okay.
For Portuguese, there is another status that or another program that is also a very good program as well, which is called Regressar.
Okay.
But that is only for Portuguese.
That's only for Portuguese returning home, is it?
Yes, correct. But the NHR is valid for 10 years and it's always good to request.
Okay. So I think that answers this person's question. They've obtained Portuguese citizenship and haven't moved to Portugal yet, so they can still benefit from NHR.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if we've got one or two more, but I think we've covered most of them. Someone is asking if you know if Australia will ever have a tax treaty with Portugal. I guess that's a difficult one to know.
Well, it's still in negotiations. From what I understand and from what I heard, we're still waiting for that. I trust that probably it will come soon.
But if do you know what would happen if they have rental income in Australia? So a property they're renting out would, and that's taxed in Australia, would they have to pay tax in Portugal as well?
There is no double taxation treaty.
Okay.
Portugal might tax, correct?
Portugal might tax. It sounds like with that one, it would be good to speak to you because you would have to look into what would happen in that instance. I think it sounds like it could happen, but definitely get some personal advice.
There are a few countries that we know how the double taxation treaty works, like the US, the UK, EU countries, but others we have to see case by case.
Okay. I think this question has already been answered, Rodrigo, which is sort of about how ETFs, which as I understand it are a combination of stocks together, how much they would be taxed. But I think it sounds like from what you answered before, it could be that they would be taxed in Portugal. But perhaps a specific question again and something that you might want to get in contact directly with. Okay, so a question there. First, if someone wanted to get you to do their annual tax return, what sort of fees does Tax Team Consulting charge for that? In
terms of annual tax return,
yeah,
we have a minimum fee, which is the main form and one annex.
Okay.
And our fee is 170 plus VAT.
Okay.
209 is the minimum. And each annex, that it will depend by types of income, the required annexes, but let's imagine that is a freelancer. Main form and one annex is 209.
Okay, perfect. So so there's that, and then also you mentioned the fee, which is just for speaking to you for an hour, which would be about $79.99 plus VAT.
No, including, sorry.
Oh, sorry, that includes it. Okay.
Yes,
Oh, we just saved people loads of money. Okay, so that's very good deal. I think it would be a very good place to start if people want to speak to you, just to start with a 1 hour call, and then you can sort of assess whether they would need any of the other items that you offer.
Yeah, feel free to contact. Okay. And normally we do meetings as well by Zoom, which is very nice because we can see the face, which
perfect.
Is good. Yeah.
So you can do that with anyone in the world. And if I can see there that you've got your email address, which is info@taxteamconsulting.com. Is that the best place to, is it best just to send you an email and arrange things from there?
Yes, yes. If I don't reply, my partners or my colleagues will reply. No problem.
Okay, so someone will reply. Philip wants to know, do you accept PayPal?
No, we don't.
Okay, okay, that's a shame. So if someone wants to pay, they would have to find another way of paying you.
It's easy.
Okay.
Currently, it's very easy.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I think that's all the sort of time we have for questions, unless you've spotted any more that you think you want to.
I was trying to get it to, it's not easy.
No, it's not. There's a lot coming through, and some of them are specific, and one or two of them I can see that we've already covered.
Okay. I'm a bit like, can I read this one? I'm a bit like Lisa without the surfing. Okay, but my employer wants to use an employer record registered in PT, so I will be paying taxes in Portugal. Okay, and therefore tax on my salary at 20% under the NHR. Yes, correct.
So maybe I can ask you about that, because there's especially since COVID, there's been a lot of people who have jobs they're now able to do remotely, and they're thinking, well, why not in Portugal, where I can go and spend time in the sunshine and on the beach. Is this a fairly easy thing to do? Because my sort of impression of it is that it can be the employers get a bit nervous about it because they wonder what's our legal obligation if this person's in another country, what's our tax obligation. But in your experience, has it been easy for the people that want to do it to actually make it happen?
Very easy.
Okay, perfect.
Very easy, not complicated. The most complicated, and I'm going to be very honest, is to get the residency.
Right. Okay.
That is currently what we know, and we do understand that it's not easy to get the residency for non-EU. After getting the residency, no problem.
Okay, and those from the EU have a fairly easy time of getting it. Correct.
Very easy, to be honest. Very easy.
Actually, I had one question that I thought of while you were asking, which is you have quite a few people who are come to Portugal, maybe from the EU particularly, for about 3 or 4 months, not quite, the 183 days or whatever. Are they able to sort of spend that time in Portugal without being taxed? Or should they be considering about residency as well? They sort of fall into this middle bit between residency and tax residency.
For someone that's, we do know that people come to Portugal, and there's a lot of people that comes like 3 or 4 months on holidays. Those people are still considered as tourists.
Okay.
Because they are fiscal resident in another country and just traveling around. And EU citizen is more easier because we can travel around.
There's no borders.
Correct.
Um,
How fast residency for EU these days? Very fast. Very fast. If, for example, someone rents a property, first is obtaining the fiscal number, then renting a property or buying a property. After that, it's very easy with the local council. And in 1 or 2 days, the residency is issued.
Okay, so much easier than those coming from.
If it is
from
an
the rest
EU
of the world.
citizen,
Yeah.
it is a EU citizen. Are you still waiting 90 days? That's not normal. That's not.
So complicated question there for you if you want it. Is it possible under the NHR scheme to get a pension under the QNUPS arrangement, which is taxed at less than 10% using the option of a temporary annuity? Do you understand that?
Not really. I would need
Okay.
to understand what is QNUPS arrangement. And then this is a very specific question.
Okay, Clive, sounds like you should get in touch directly with that one.
Yeah.
And I think we're maybe coming to an end with the questions there. One there under NHR, how much is the medical insurance contribution and is it tax deductible?
Under the NHR, if the income is declared under the NHR, there will be no tax credits, which means that the medical insurance will not be considered a tax credit. However, for example, let's imagine that you have, and this can be made in Portugal, there's income that will be taxed under the NHR, but self-employed income that is not taxed under the NHR, which means that for that self-employed income, you can use tax credits, and yes, medical insurance is considered a tax credit. Okay.
So I hope that answers your question, Ram. Are there any more questions that you can see there that you want to answer, or are you happy to round it up, Paula?
There was a lot in the beginning, but I could not see them, sorry. I could not see them, even trying to.
So there's one question there under the sort of NHR. Do you get the same benefits if your income comes from a Portuguese company? So would that depend on whether your profession is one of the special professions or not? Correct. Okay.
Right. First, to be taxed under the NHR high value activity,
okay,
has to be a high value activity that, or a service that the person will be providing.
Okay.
Okay, and the contract has to, the contract between the individual and the company needs to mention that as well.
Okay.
And if it is a self-employed, can be the contract with the company to prove, or can be the qualification of the individual.
And when applying for the NHR, how do you approve that you have that your income your job category is one of these high value professions? Do they need to look at a job offer, or I don't know, how do you say that I am for example, a photographer, and that means I'm an artist?
Okay. The NHR is requested and it's there.
Okay.
To be taxed under the NHR rules is something different. Only when the annual tax return is submitted is when the tax authorities will see that you want to be taxed under the NHR rules and, okay, and the benefits. When this happens, normally is when the tax authorities will contact the individual and request the contract or the qualification.
Okay. So at the point of registration, you don't really need to worry, but at the tax return point, that's when they will look into it a little further.
Yeah, in the past, when the NHR scheme started, yes, that would be required.
Okay.
That would be required, not now.
And is it normal for people to be asked to prove that they do meet the requirements?
Yeah.
Okay. Just once or once every year?
When the tax return is submitted.
Okay.
The annual tax return is submitted.
Okay.
Okay.
Will you be sharing the slides? Well, I know that I will be making the video available. I'll try and put it up on somewhere online so that people can see it. So, because I know there's been a lot of information in here and some people said that they joined late. So I will make it available to people, and you can definitely see everything there anyway, that way. And then one other possible easy question, do you need to have a sort of a minimum income amount to qualify for NHR?
No.
No, okay.
You have to have a minimum amount to request the residency.
Right.
That's different.
Okay.
I was seeing here, I'm an EU citizen, but I will be receiving pension from Canada. How will be taxed? The EU citizen will help only when getting the residency. It will be easier. In terms, this is a different subject. In terms of receiving pension from Canada, will you be subject to be taxed? Yes, if no taxes have been paid in Canada.
Okay. Perfect. And then I suppose after the 10, have you got one?
Yeah, just
Perfect.
replying here to Alexander. What was the name of the similar program for Portuguese nationals coming back home? It is the Programa Regressar. It was on hold because we needed the approval of the budget 2022 and because of the election, but it will start again. Regressar, that's the name. But the regressar is only valid for 3 years, which means that I would say to apply anyway for the NHR.
Can you apply for both?
No, it will not.
Okay.
For both, because Programa Regressar will exempt you from being taxed on 50% of the income. Then you cannot have both. You can't have
okay.
one or the other. No.
Okay. So potentially the NHR might be the better one, but again,
it will depend.
Possibly a good idea to speak to you, but it's good that there is an incentive there, because I know during the crisis a lot of Portuguese left to go to other countries, and now there needs to be an incentive to get people to come back to Portugal.
Correct.
So I think, well, we're coming up on the hour, so it's a good point to a good chance to round it up. And just to repeat your contact information, if people want to get in touch for anything more specific, your email is info@taxteamconsulting.com, and there's also a phone number there as well, but I guess the email is the easiest one. And from there, you can set up some kind of meeting over Zoom or whatever, and get an insight into your taxes.
Right.
Well, thank you very much, Paula. It is I've learned a lot. It's been very, very confusing for me to try and sort of show off the different questions that people have. But thank you so much for coming on and answering them.
I wish all a good Easter, and thank you for this time as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for helping us with all of our questions.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.